the title of this presentation is actually, this should be the last slide. So I'm going to do something that was not done with Star Wars. So I'm going to first make the prequel, and then we will conclude with Outblurring Boundaries, a semiotic perspective on expansion of consciousness beyond reality's edge. It's also a long title. Okay, so let's start with some geometry class. Who loves geometry? Somebody of you? Oh, of course. Maybe you don't like too much geometry at school, but if you can remember the definition of a dot, it's very fascinating. A dot represents a location in any space. It doesn't have any length, height, shape, or size. But for making that point, I had to draw it. And actually, you can measure the diameter of that. So is it a real point if it doesn't have any size? Or I could maybe call it a point and make it a square. Why not? A point, a dot, marks the beginning to draw any figure of shape, and it labels with capital letter. So if you study some segment, a dot, big, capital A. Okay, so we have here in front of us something that doesn't have shape or size. But if we take something that has no shape or size and remove it, we get a line that is a series of points that have no shape and not dimension, connected by a straight path. And a line has no thickness. So what you can see there is almost an illusion, because that's no thickness. A line has no thickness. And can be extended indefinitely in both directions. The length of a line is indefinite, and it can have infinite numbers of points that have no shape or dimension or size. And if we get a bit mad and we take this line and we move it, and we connect these lines, we have a shape, a polygon, in this case, a triangles. And a polygon is just a closed and flat shape made of straight lines. So my point is that triangle is made by points that have no size, but we have a shape there. So probably if you picture this notion when you study geometry, you said, oh my goodness, that's a bit esoteric, something that has no light. So this is my point, that geometry is actually something that look like a bit of esoteric. In 2011, the British mathematician Ian Stewart shared an article on an online journal titled Aspiring to a Higher Plane. I was very thrilled, like, come on, this can be, of course, about theosophy or esotericism. But no, it was actually talking about a book published in 1884 by the English theologian Edwin Abbott. It's a text that maybe some of the mathematics lover would know. It's a romance of many dimensions, and already the title said many things. Abbott's book, Flatland, a romance of many dimensions, transports us to a two-dimensional universe filled with flatlanders. The geometric figure living in flatland that, as we saw, they are just limited to length and width. So there is no up and down, because there is just one single dimension. As every good story, there is a narrator. Our narrator is a square. And one day, it finds himself navigating a peculiar one-dimensional land called line land. Now, picture line land, it's a place inhabited just by lines and points, so just one dimension. These residents can see only what exists along their one-dimensional plane, meaning that the square appears actually just as a series of points stretched along a line. Frustrated, the square attempts to enlighten the king of Lionland about the existence of a second dimension, but the king reacts with skepticism and docility, eventually deciding that the square's radical ideas must be silenced, and I mean literally try to kill it. Can you imagine kill a square? This dynamic sounds a little bit familiar, probably in the study of esotericism. This social dimension that try to exclude certain knowledge and try to convince that there are more dimensions or something that we cannot see, something invisible. Soon enough, the square received an unexpected visitor, a sphere. But the square can only perceive this three-dimensional object as a circle, a flat two-dimensional representation of a much greater being. As the sphere gracefully glazes up and down in flatland, you can see the circle that enlarges or becomes smaller. So actually, the square struggles a bit to grasp the very notion of a third dimension. I will not spoil the ending for you if you want to read the book. I leave the delightful surprise for you to discover. But this is just an example, the example of fiction that is in line with the period at the end of the 19th century. Through his imaginative lens, Abbott clearly mirrors the struggles to comprehend realities beyond a limited perception, highlighting the limitations that people face when we try to navigate the complexities of our existence. This text really is in line with the fascination for the invisible that was at the end of the 19th century. The different planes, of course, relates also to the new scientific developments at the end of the 19th century, such as physics, chemistry, electromagnetism, X-ray. All this scientific development creates fertile ground for fictions. And now we enter a little bit in the facts rather than fiction. In 1880, 4 years before Flatland, the British mathematician and writer Charles Howard Hinton wrote an article about the fourth dimension. What is the fourth dimension? And in 1904, he published a book, The Fourth Dimension, very creative with this title. He was one of the most effective popularizers of the idea of a fourth dimension through his pragmatic approach to broadening one's consciousness. Hinton's work was a primary source of information for the theosophists Leadbeater, Rudolf Steiner, and Claude Bragdon. And if we consider this last, who was an architect and an artist, maybe you may know him because he wrote The Beautiful Necessity, 7 essays on theosophy and architecture. Bragdon published in 1913 a primer of higher space, The Fourth Dimension, and in 1916, Four-Dimensional Vistas. You can actually see here that some of the picture of the sphere falling, moving up and down are very similar to the one from Flatland that we saw before. So we can see that geometry was used in both scientific fiction and in theosophical texts to try to explain what is beyond reality's edge. Blavatsky herself actually used some small circle in the poem of The Secret Doctrine. You can see it's actually weird because there is a text and then a small dot and then a little bit of text and then another small sign for indicating the absolute, the first consciousness, and then the material world. And it's kind of interesting that all these people use circle lines, geometry, points So she actually wrote something in The Secret Doctrine, something about dimension. She wrote, "The three dimensions belong really but to one attribute or characteristic of matter, extension. And popular common sense justly rebels against the idea that under any condition of things there can be more than three of such dimensions as length, breadth, and thickness. These terms and the term dimension itself all belong to one plane of thought, to one stage of evolution, to one characteristic of matter." And if we continue the theosophical journey, we see that others also believe in this multidimensional, almost multi-level planes of reality. Leadbeater believed that the existence of the fourth dimension could explain not just the transparency of the etheric vision, but also the higher level of knowledge which he associated with the astral plane. So we can see that theosophists did believe in planes of nature. Theosophy were very inspired by science, Bayesian thought, occult chemistry. So scientific theosophy, theosophical scientism almost married well together. So now this was the background. This was our first approach. So we shouldn't be too surprised to see right at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century pictures like this. In a time when the boundaries between science, esoteric current, and art were dissolving in the most fascinating way across Europe and North America, it was a period when theosophists and artists alike were captivated by the idea of different dimensions, invisible realms, and that extended beyond the ordinary perception. Moreover, theosophy resonated also with many artists at the time that they took theosophy in their practice. For example, Wassily Kandinsky, who mentioned actually Blavatsky at the beginning of On the Spiritual and Art. So we should not be surprised at all to encounter painting like that. This type of paintings are actually an outcome of an age captivated by the idea of deeper dimension, deeper hidden veil of reality. And here we have some of the character that developed this approach to exploring the hidden reality. This artist starts blurring boundaries between what is fact and what is fiction. The Swiss painter Emma Kunz wrote, "Everything happens in accordance with specific system of law, which I feel within me, and which never allows me to rest." So if we think about law, actually geometry is a good tool for representing this perceived, invisible, but perceived law. And then we have the famous quote by the theosophically inspired artist Paul Klee. "Art does not reproduce the visible, rather it makes visible." So, and here we have a methodological issue, but because what is the visible that we should see? What is the visible that is made visible? And what is so the invisible? It seems that these artistic explorations place great importance on geometric shapes as a means for expressing higher realities. And this raises questions about their meaning. If we consider geometric shapes or abstract geometric style as developed by Piet Mondrian, Wassily Kandinsky, if we consider these paintings a sign, what do they represent? And is represent even a good word? Can we say that they represent because there is some root in similarity, like a picture of a dog is similar to a dog because we can see that there is a similarity? or maybe by analogy, or maybe something else. So how can we interpret or understand that connection between the shape and the reality that the shape tries to convey? Many theosophically inspired artists would refer to some extra perception or sixth sense, or even better, intuition. Intuition became actually a tool to understand and feel. It's not just logically, but feel. There is a big highlighting in the emotional, in the fact of being there in front of the artwork, to experience this intuition, the meaning and the truth behind the sign, rather than just understanding, starting logically, like a symbol, like we can understand a symbology where we can actually try to get the meaning with, like we did in ancient art or Renaissance art. So we got a problem here. And these artists try to represent this higher dimension with the invisible laws of nature. Every artist actually uses different type of words. And in their work, there is actually a key, or at least they propose themselves as having a key to this higher dimension. How can we access this invisible reality? Again, through intuition. Artistic contemplation can provoke visions and elevate consciousness, blurring the lines between the imagined and the real. This process can craft a new reality born from the depth of imagination, ultimately transforming the perception of the physical, redefining the parameters of what is deemed real. And you can see actually in these pictures what AI interprets as getting some information from the pictures. Actually, very interesting to see the geometric shape. Both are geometric shape, and there is some sort of epic mood in the pictures. And here we got at the end the last hint. This is what the artists proposed to us, but what about now? So we can, of course, distinguish the ethic and the emic perspective. We can believe it, we cannot, we can have this experience or not. But I would like to propose you a third way. The third way is these paintings stored in museums, in institutions that take care of this work, and they propose some interesting activity. So we jump practically in the future of 100 years, and we reach Malmö in 2020 in Sweden, and Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, where museums propose guided meditations on the works of Hilma af Klint and Piet Mondrian. Both artists were inspired by theosophy. So how can we take that? And after the lecture of Egil, actually, it was mind-blowing. So it's interesting to see what can be our methodology in studying this phenomena. That is actually, it's even beyond the painting itself, it's beyond art history. Here we have some modern practice of meditation. Are these esoteric practice? Or just, how can we locate these practices inside the bigger picture of the study of esotericism, the connection between the study of esotericism and art? And then we have that small symbol that actually is not so small, because I saw it for real. It's like tall like this. That belongs to a group of artists near Turin in Italy called Solar Angels. It's an anonymous group. I know it's anonymous, but I know them because, well, we know it's research. And I had the chance before pandemic to, as that ruined my entire ethnographic work. But I had the chance of seeing one of the meditation that they did in front of this painting. And that was a very impressive experience. It was, how can we understand this? Are they searching for something? Are they trying to reach a higher state? And also, me as a researcher has researchers. How can we take our role inside the field when we experience, when we saw rituals and we saw this type of meditation? Of course, the field was different. In the case of solar angels, it was an inside experience inside the group. But the other two are in museums, publicly available. So I will just leave you with this small issue of how can we analyze this art blurring boundaries, art that blur boundaries between what is the reality and how can we approach not just Hilma af Klint, but the people meditating on Hilma af Klint. Who are they? Thank you for your attention.